Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the City of Mesa Planning and Zoning Board public hearing. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Just for the record, Mike Clement, our chairman, couldn't be with us today, so we'll try to do our best to hold down the fort for him. And board member Jessica Sarkisian is not with us today, but we also want to welcome Shelley Allen back to the board. She was with us for a while, and we're glad to have you back.
Thank you.
So the first thing that we'll do today is take action on all consent agenda items. So if anybody is here to speak about an item on the consent agenda, which is indicated with an asterisk on the agenda, please fill out a blue card and bring that up to our staff. Here's our board member, Sarkisian. She's here, yay. That's all right. Do we have any blue cards, Mr. Wesley? Oh, okay. Excellent, then we'll go ahead. Oh, looks like we do have one. Let's see what that's for. Thank you. Let's see, what is this? C1703. Oh, okay. So, yeah, all right, cool. I'll just leave that there. Okay. Seeing there's no more blue cards, we'll go ahead and start with the consent agenda. Make sure everything's okay over there. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is we'll read through the consent agenda. Item 2A is approval of the minutes from the June 20th and June 21st study session and regular hearing. Item 3A is case Z17030 in District 2, the 1400 block of South Higly Road, located north of the US 60 freeway on the west side of Higly on approximately 1 acre. This is a site plan review to allow for the development of a restaurant with a drive-through, and the staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 3B is case Z17032 in District 6, the 7400 through 7500 blocks of East Ray Road, approximately 10 acres in size. This is a site plan review to allow for the development of an industrial building, and the staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 4A is Z17029 in District 4, the West Side Clark Historic District Overlay. This is to consider rezoning for the West Side Clark Historic District to add the Historic District Overlay. The area is generally bounded by lots on the north side of West 2nd Place, lots on the south side of West Pepper Place, North Date on the west, and North Country Club Drive on the east. This request will create a local historic district. The staff recommendation is approval. Looks like we got another blue card, and just make sure. Okay, great. All right. Item 4B, case Z17036 in District 2, the 2900 through 3000 blocks of East Southern Avenue, and the 1000 through 1200 blocks of South Los Alamos Road on approximately 27 acres. This is a rezone from AG to RSL-4.5 to allow for the development of a single residence subdivision. The staff recommendation is to continue the case to the August 16th, 2017 hearing to re-advertise. Item 5A is the Allred Ranch preliminary plat. This is the companion case to item 4C, which was case Z17036. The staff recommendation is also to continue to August 16th to re-advertise. Item 5B is the McDowell Citrus preliminary plat, the 4100 to 4200 blocks of East McDowell Road, located west of Greenfield on the south side of McDowell on 20 acres. The staff recommendation is approval with conditions. And item 6A is the proposed zoning ordinance amendment to section 11-67-4E regarding conditions requiring mandatory supermajority vote by City Council, and the staff recommendation is approval. I think that's it. Do I have a motion to recommend approval of the consent agenda?
I would make it. Here we go. I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as read in for the record for Wednesday, July 17th, 2017.
Okay, is there a second?
Yeah, I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor, please vote. Okay. Everybody is unanimous on that. Okay, and item 7A, this is case Z17031 in District 3, 1705 South Stapley Drive on approximately 2 acres. This is a request for a site plan review to allow for the development of a restaurant with a drive-through. Mr. Wesley, would you like to make a presentation?
Mr. Long.
Madam Chairman and member of the board, the address is 1705 South Stapley Drive. It's a site plan review. It's a proposed Whataburger in front of the Mesa Grand Shopping Center. This is a well-established shopping center with the unique characteristics of along Stapley. We have established pad building, restaurants, and other. None of them is drive-through. They're all like along the Stapley Drive, so you don't have any parking in front of the Stapley Drive and the building. So the buildings basically hug the entrance towards the east. So this is a site that used to be the Macaroni Grill restaurant. Now it's vacant. Basically, that building has been cleared up. Across the street from this pad is just recently built Mellow Mushroom. So that kind of gives the orientation. So this is a drive-through facility, Whataburger, new one here proposed. So we work with the applicant. It's a compatible use here, so we don't have any issue with the land use because it's supports our general plan and all, but our general plan also have retrofitting older areas like this or old neighborhood or redevelopment where it doesn't support our goals and policies in the general plan where it says you're supposed to bring the building close to the streets and make it more pedestrian friendly and all that kind of curb appeal, increase the curb appeal. And also in our zoning code where the site, we review our site plans against criterias, this does not help us when they proposed a building which is really far from the intersection, way in the middle of the almost parking lot and has wrapped around driveway. So we worked with the applicant and we suggested some alternatives with the applicant, but applicant mentioned us that they definitely need that wraparound for their business service, the way their facilities are served by trucks. So still we think there is an alternative or can be still they can function. So that's why our last condition of approval says that they can still have the building, but just eliminate the wraparound and doesn't have to move the building. The footprint stays the same, everything stays the same. So staff recommendations is approval with conditions, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have.
Anyone have any questions for Wahid? Oh, no? Did you? Oh, sorry.
I would like to suggest an additional condition of approval that the site plan is reviewed and approved by the Traffic and Engineering Department regarding the drive-through access and exit.
All right. Is the applicant here today, Mr. Bartholomew?
I'm actually not Mr. Bartholomew. My name is Bill Sorrells. I am from Whataburger. I'm the Group Director of Real Estate Development. Matt couldn't come, nor could Joe Neely, who has worked extensively with the staff, who's our Director of Design, but I'm here in his place. The restriction or the conditions of approval, I don't think we'll be able to live with those restrictions. Our current prototype requires circulation around our building for truck, also for safety vehicles in times of emergency. There is also another condition that's been placed for the approval, which would put a cover over our drive-through, which would also require us to go back to the members of the shopping center that we're in in a amendment to the ECR, which we've already been told we cannot get. So those two conditions will pretty much prevent us from moving forward with this project. I'd like to point out the fact that in 2012, a site plan was approved for a Chase Bank on the Mellow Mushroom Pad, which did have circulation all the way around. Chase Bank made concessions with decorative concrete, which we're willing to make as well, and improving the pedestrian access with landscaping, berms, whatever else would help us be part of the community. We've been a part of the community of Mesa for a long time. Units 421 and 765 are up the road from here. 400 unit would probably be in the early 80s. So we've been in Mesa for a long time, and we'd like to continue to be here and grow. That's all I have.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? No? How about any questions for staff? Shelley?
So my question to staff is, I mean, you guys have taken a look at this, and I'm assuming that public and fire safety have taken a look at this site as well as through the plan, or they will through the plan review process, as well as the circulation of this site as far as, safety concerns and all that. I'm a firm believer that I think this site is kind of designed, and I understand your concerns, but I think this is more, it's an older shopping center, obviously, and we want to keep with that aesthetic appeal to have that enhanced pedestrian access and landscape on that side. But those were the only two concerns that I had. I wanted to make sure that as we go through the process, the continual building development services process, that they will be, the life safety, we'll take a look at it, as well as the traffic engineering. Thank you.
I guess I had a question, just because I'm late to the game on this one, but is this a double drive-through? It is. And so the canopy that would be going over both sides, the whole thing in the middle? Okay. And the part they're talking about as far as the circulation on the outside, this is not regarding the drive-through, but it's regarding the outside by the trash dumpster all the way around to the front? Okay. And so the city is stating that you're not in favor of that. Just, is it for an aesthetic standpoint, a safety standpoint? I mean, when you look at that part of that area, it's a lot of parking lots and landscape islands in there with the macaroni grill and everything else that was there. So is it just because it's becoming a wider drive aisle, or just because it's viewable from the frontage is what your concern is?
Yes, Chair, Board Members Kazian, it has, if you look through the report and the history of the site, we've always had along this frontage buildings that have engaged the landscape area on the entry drives without having any parking or drive aisles between them in that area. And so this would start to deviate from that rather unique and character-defining theme that we've had in this particular location. And so we would prefer to see this site developed again with the restaurant or the pad building brought all the way up to the landscape area without any separation of the drive aisle between the building and that landscape area.
So has there been any times when the board or the city has deviated due to circumstances, or just deviated at all? Because my other question would be for the applicant, or if you guys know, I don't drive by this site a lot, but as far as I know, that pad has been vacant for quite some time.
It's been a couple of years that it's been vacant. Mm-hmm. So the deviation that almost occurred, I guess, at this location, as the applicant mentioned a minute ago, on the north side where the Mellow Mushroom is today, after the On the Border went away, there was a proposal for a bank that had drive-through lanes associated with it. And staff had recommended against that, but it was approved with that drive-through lane in there. It was minimized as narrowly as possible and hidden behind the landscape as much as possible, but that was approved. It ultimately didn't get built. And when the Mellow Mushroom came back, we were able to work with them and keep the standard of the previous site plan.
Would there be any leeway in terms of adding enhanced landscaping in what they do, the minimal area that they do have? I don't know if they do different types of trees or a denser product or something, just to give that appearance with it. So at least we're not, as things are starting to come through, we're not constantly saying, well, you can't have the drive through there, but because it's a pre-existing site, there's not a lot of ways to renegotiate things and place things. It just seems, some of those areas, you don't want to see them sitting vacant for that long either.
Yes, board member, that is certainly another option that could be looked at as other ways to kind of hide or screen that drive-through lane or that circulation with additional landscaping, some things along that line would be another approach. It's not one that staff recommended, but it is an option. If I may, since I've got the floor a little bit, going back to the comments about the traffic circulation and traffic engineering, maybe looking at that, we could try that traditionally. Their interest is the streets, and they don't really involve themselves in the on-site circulation issues. So I'm not sure what comments we would get from them.
Considering this site has a pretty good amount of landscaping up front as it exists, even after the road is in place, I'm guessing that conversation would have had to come up, and maybe the thought of negotiating some kind of a middle ground for landscape. It feels like to me there'd want to be some time to try and revise it. I would hate to think that we weren't going to do it, but I can see the concerns based on the general plan. It makes sense to me that would want to be maintained. But I mean, this is more discussionary in my eyes. Wouldn't it seem like there might want to be some time to come to a conclusion? Sounds like there is room for some negotiation and some revision, unless it was kind of stated, and you guys could correct me if I'm wrong, but stated maybe that we weren't going to do anything but this. If there's any change, we're not going to do the project. I don't know, but in other words, the discussion of continuing, give some time for design was kind of on my mind. If it's preventing the project to move forward, not everyone's satisfied at this point.
So, Chair, Board Member Astle, we've certainly had some of these discussions with the applicant along the way as we've looked at various options and how to, if they're not going to get rid of the drive on that side, how can it be hidden a little bit better, and they've done a lot of things in that direction. They've really made a lot of changes trying to address all the staff's concerns. This has kind of gotten to their bottom line. From our perspective, we really felt like the drive needed to be gone. If in the board's opinion, it can function better with that and that is sufficiently landscaped with what they put there, or you'd want to see it approved with some additional landscaping, certainly those are all things that I'm sure we could work out with the applicant. I don't know if it necessarily take a continuance versus just modification of the steps to do that.
And I guess I could also say, maybe this is a question for the applicant, but based on the stipulations within the staff report that are listed in the design that staff recommended as a potential method of resolving some of the issues and arriving at something that coincides with the general plan, what items about that make it so you wouldn't do the project? If the truck can still be if it can still access that side of the building and have a way out, and if fire is, and I know fire could accommodate this site from other locations, we have well within the 150 foot for fire trucks and whatnot. It would mainly be your needs as a restaurant, and just help us understand maybe what items about your service require that road.
Specifically the drive around the restaurant?
Yeah, just the drive around the restaurant.
It is our prototypical standard.
So I understand that from a prototypical standpoint, but I also have seen many prototypes evolve per general plan and whatnot.
Yes. Standard in the industry for all QSRs. Our competitors in the area have full circulation around their buildings. We are a use of convenience, not destination per se. So as many ways as our customers can get to us, the better for us. Our contracts with our delivery trucks specify delivery on a certain side of the building, and it's the driver's side of the vehicle, which is why we need that truck to come in from the front. So specifically, that's one reason.
Okay, and if you can access that side of the building without necessarily looping around the building, would that get closer to satisfying the Whataburger or not?
In the way that the staff has proposed the site, the truck would have to come in from the wrong side.
Okay.
Yeah, we looked at that specifically.
Chair, Board Member Astle, I'm not sure how much I've looked at that larger parking field that's available to the south and west. So Mr. Lom in his drawing showed the truck going north. It could just easily circulate through more of that parking area and come in the same direction that they would like it to be, we believe. We haven't laid out the turning radiuses to see what that would really involve, but it sure looks like it could work.
Could you comment on what Mr. Wesley just said? Do you think that you could work with them on that?
We would have to look at it, but again, we're looking at it also from the standpoint of competitive disadvantage. All of our competitors in the area have full circulation. We have to give our operators the best building they can get to succeed.
Any other questions for the applicant while he's up here? No? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We'll discuss amongst ourselves a bit more here. Our architect-minded folks here, I'm looking at you two in particular to see what you have to say.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Dane in that that's an enormous landscape there already. I don't really see, like when I look at it from the street, I don't see that the space there for a truck is really going to cause any sort of ugly scar in the landscape or anything like that. The one thing they would be doing is there'd be a truck kind of covering up their restaurant for part of the day when they're doing deliveries, but I think that's usually not when customers are coming in and out. And I agree, I mean, if you look across the street, there's a Chick-fil-A, there's all these other ones across the street that have the full access around it. They're just right across. I don't know if I'm supposed to, I can't ever show anyone this stuff, but anyway, they're all the other ones down that stretch. On the opposite side of the street, they all have the full wraparound. So I think that I'm totally fine with the applicant moving ahead as it's designed.
Really my questions were more related to understanding some compromise, because we also don't want to skip over the general plan. Some things may have been done prior to the most recent plan that's in place and that the voters voted for, but at the same time, there's a lot of landscape there. I don't think landscape's necessarily the problem. It's just kind of the concept behind what we generally want things to begin doing in our city. It can kind of go both ways for me. I have a little trouble with it on both sides. I feel like we can accommodate the needs of the restaurant based on staff's design. It seems like there'd be a way to accommodate it, but I also don't know enough about competitive advantage to discuss whether or not that's going to detract from their business model. So it's a hard one for me to determine. I can see it go both ways. I'd be interested to hear what everyone's thinking.
I meant to ask the applicant, what percentage of your business is drive-through versus walk-in?
Across the system, it's over 65%, approaching 70%.
Okay. And I've been trying to pull up on Google Maps, but Tim, since you have it up, the other drive-throughs on the west side of Stapley, the point is, this is a main entrance to this site. It's not just, if it was another place that wasn't the main entrance, then I don't think would be an issue at all. So there's in consideration of the approach of the shopping center. And in the competitors, I don't know if, those same things, they're really just kind of street access. They're not really part of a center. Is that
what you see? You think the ones on the other side of the street's a different kind of
a model of it?
Look,
It
a
doesn't,
different kind of.
I need to pull it up, but I would say,
Yeah, I would, I mean, based on what
Chair,
it's.
if I may just interrupt, if we could wait till we get the aerial pulled up here too, so people at home can see what it is we're talking about.
There we go.
But
Thank you.
certainly the west side of Stapley was developed with a different site plan,
It's a
a
different
different
model,
concept,
right?
different approvals by council than this side was. We're trying to maintain what was previously and originally approved for this side, which is rather unique.
It's right there, just go north a little bit, yeah. So like the Red Robin, the In-N-Out, the Chick-fil-A, they all have the full access.
Well, and that's a different developer from what I'm
Yeah,
understanding.
yeah, it's-
So I guess my opinion on this is the primary entrance into that Stapley Center. And I think that the way that Mr. Alam has designed this, I think that's as cohesive as we're going to get with that center entering into that. I don't have any issues. I understand that, if we can work the truck delivery
Yeah,
side of it.
that's good.
And we can work out the safety, the safety factor as far as the vehicle circulation within the site. I don't have any problem. I support this.
And Jennifer, and everyone who was looking at it, like, if you see how big, you can see it on the screen now, you see how much landscape there already is. I mean, you've got, how deep is that, 40, 50 feet? I mean, you've got a lot of landscape.
More than that.
Even more. You got a lot of landscape before you're gonna, from your sight line, the drive-in's just gonna be a tiny little stretch, which you probably won't even see because it's got all these little bushes in front of it already.
Since the applicant is up here, I think you did mention when we first had you come up that you would be okay with looking at adding additional landscaping or some items like that that would help
We had
screen.
discussed that, additional landscaping and also the, decorative concrete, that the drive around the building could be, I don't want to say hidden, but the appearance could be minimized. And I did notice that was in the approval in 2012 for the bank, that the bank had also said they'll minimize the look and feel of that concrete, and we're willing to do the same thing.
Thank you.
And I guess just to clarify, I would not support a wraparound around the building, just so to clarify that. I think that we need to stay with the integrity of the initial site design.
Okay, so you're in favor of staff's recommended conditions of approval?
Would it not be of interest to you, depending on how the board decides to go, this could go in a way you don't want it to? Would it be preferable that you have some time to work further with staff and come to a conclusion that might be a little more down the path that you'd like it to go down?
We're always willing to work. We've been working with staff for over a year. Our first visits were in February of 2016, so we've been working on this for quite a while. We don't have as much time left in our contract, so we would have to look at that also.
And you had mentioned one of the stipulations you had problems with also was the covering of the drive-through.
Yes.
And you'd mentioned that the shopping center itself, the restrictions prohibited that, and you didn't feel you could get that approval?
No.
Is that something in the steps we could possibly just, state, we request that they ask for it through the shopping center or whoever, but if they're not going to allow it, the shopping center won't allow it, then it's kind of like this, their city is they're fighting against each other for something. To me, if it's you're gonna kill a business over a covering that looks internal, doesn't seem kind of worth it. It could, just to amend the stip a little bit, stating if able to be acquired or something like that by the association.
Yes, Chair, I think if the stip were meant to say that unless we receive a letter from the center owner saying that they do not allow it or something along that line affirmatively from the center, that it's not allowed, that would do it.
I think that's fair enough. Do you agree? Does anyone have any more questions for the applicant or our staff? All right.
And I would like to make a motion that we approve case number Z17-31, 1705 South Stapley Drive with, and let me make sure that I get this spot on, with the site plan that's been submitted with the staff report, with the conditions that have been included with the staff report, as well as that we do ask transportation to take a look at our circulation, just for safety reasons on the site. Did I get it?
Did you also want to add that we'd like the applicant to approach the shopping center developer for approval of the?
And I guess I understood that, and we'll just make sure that if for some reason the shopping center comes back and says they will not approve to have a canopy cover, then we can revise the plan.
Then we could eliminate step B.
Right, exactly. We got it?
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Let me ask a quick question, staff, regarding this. As there's just sketches in the staff report and recommendations, the site plan is going to drastically change based on any type of approval, in this case, as it's motioned. Would that be administrative from this point on, covering any of those changes on your end, or would you, is it a great enough variation? Is there still room to talk through? There's nothing specific on there that's dimensioned and figured out and reviewed from a technical standpoint. I'm just wondering what would occur at this. I don't typically see sketch recommendations as often as.
Right. So yes, Chair, Board Member Astle, as recommended with, I believe that's stipulation I, it would be eliminating the driveway that goes on the north and west sides of the building. And so that's a fairly straightforward change. It's working out the curb radius returns and some slight adjustments to the parking, so just that'd be very easy for staff just to handle those changes.
We have a motion. Would anybody like to make a second?
I'll make a second.
Board Member Sarkisian, did you have anything? Okay. All right, well, we have a motion and a second. Let's go ahead and vote. All in favor? Or actually, please just push your buttons. All right. We have everybody in favor, but Board Member Boyle votes against. Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and move to item number 8A. This is item Z17033 in District 5, the 5600 through 5900 blocks of East Lombo Parkway, located south of the Loop 202 Red Mountain Freeway. This is a request for a council use permit for the installation of 2 multi-tenant freeway landmark monument signs within a commercial center. Mr. Ellsworth.
Madam Chair, members of the board, as you mentioned, this is a request for a council use permit to allow 2 freeway landmark signs. In the early 2000s, the City Council approved guidelines that would direct development and siting and size for freeway landmark signs. Freeway landmark signs are allowed in any zoning district subject to a council use permit. One of those guidelines discusses that it needs to be part of a regional commercial center. This is part of the Longbow Business Park. It's specifically part of that, which is about approximately 300 acres. It's part of a 50-acre portion that's a retail center. It was approved back in October of last year. As part of that, they're requesting 2 freeway landmark signs along their frontage. There's an analysis of the guidelines within the staff report as we discussed at the study session. In order to get the council use permit, they need a recommendation of approval regarding the siting and the signage, not the siting, the siting and the height from this board, and it goes to the design review board for recommendation on design. It's been to the design review board last week. The design review board made their preliminary comments in a work session, and will be the applicant is working on some revisions to that sign. They were overall favorable to the design. They've made some suggestions about materials and being able to tie some of that back into the center. As it relates to siting and signage and height, the freeway landmark guidelines stipulate first that there should be 1 freeway landmark sign per development. It then further says, however, you could have 2 if you have at least 2,000 square feet of frontage along a freeway. The Longbow Business Park has 2,640 square feet. Therefore, there can be a consideration for 2 signs on the site. The next talks about location of those sites, and particularly it relates to height. The signs need to be be located along the freeway frontage. They have to be within 200 feet of that freeway frontage. These ones are located within 20 feet of the freeway frontage, so it meets that regulation. It talks about distance to residential zone property. It needs to be at least 10 feet, 10 feet per foot of height away from residentially zoned property. Where they're proposing their locations, the proposed height they're requesting is 60 feet. They're 600 feet to the west to the Sunshine Acres Children's Home, zoned residential, and then there's a neighborhood across Wrecker Road, immediately across Wrecker Road, to the center itself, and they're 623 feet from that nearest residential property. So they are meeting that. As we evaluate the heights of the sign is allowed to be 3 times the width. So if they're 60 feet, the maximum width that sign can be is 20 feet wide. They are meeting that regulation. Where they came to the 60-foot, the freeway landmark guidelines stipulate there should be a visual analysis done at the proposed height and to show a simulation. They did 10 feet higher and then two heights lower. So the visual simulation they've done shows 60 feet, 70 feet, 40, and 50 feet. We then did an on-site analysis where staff went and met with the applicant. We drove the freeway as they raised and lowered a crane to simulate where the identification of that center would be. As we did that analysis, it came to be, and as you can see in your report, 60 feet is the appropriate amount in order to identify that center in enough time to exit the freeway. With all that being said, the applicant has done their citizen participation. They initially went to 1,000 feet, and to meet the guidelines, they needed to do an additional 200 feet. They've sent those neighborhood notifications. They held a neighborhood meeting at the Longbow Golf Club a month or so ago. They've included the Q&A from that in the citizen participation report. There were a number of neighbors who attended that meeting from across Wrecker Road with concerns regarding location of signage, not just with the freeway landmark signage, but signage in general along the overall center itself, attached signage, monument signage. The same neighbors, or some of the same neighbors, attended the design review board and also expressed concerns with the need for freeway landmark signs at all, the height of those signs. One of the concerns was that they felt that there was some compromise given that the maximum height would be the height of the sprouts. So at these at 60 feet, the sprouts is about 36 feet in height, so it's over that. So there's concern about the height of the signs also from those neighbors. We have some of those neighbors present tonight, so I'm sure we'll be hearing from them. We are recommending, I should say there is, with the analysis of the freeway landmark signs, there's only one modification that the applicant is requesting. It's the distance between the signs themselves. The freeway landmark guidelines state that there should be 2,000 feet between the signs themselves. As we look at that, there are criteria mentioned in the guidelines themselves about how to consider those modifications and the ability to grant those. One talks about the quality of the sign. We're working through the quality with the design review board. The other talks about is the intent being met? Are there site conditions that would require consideration of modification? So in meeting the intent and meeting the overall intent of the guidelines about distances from residential, about allowing signage along a long distance of freeway frontage of 2,600 square, or 2,000 feet or more. As we're looking at that, what they're requesting is approximately 1,800 feet. I think it's about 1,762 between the signs themselves. If we were to go to 2,000 feet, the required height that they would need per the guidelines would put it too close to residential neighborhoods. So if we squeeze that in a little bit, the modification they're requesting is minor in nature as you look at what it is the request is about. It doesn't have a negative impact as far as the signage for future freeway landmark guidelines. If they were to lower the signs a little bit, they could get closer to the residential. So it's a give and take. So staff analyzed it. We're supportive of the modification. We're recommending approval with the standard conditions that are in the staff report.
Thank you, Tom. Does anyone have any questions for staff?
I do have a question, and you may have said it and I missed it, and I apologize if that's the case, but how close is the nearest residence to either one of these signs?
If you were to look at the site plan, they've actually provided the site distance that 623 feet, I believe, is to the nearest residential parcel or the nearest home across Wrecker Road. So 623.
So that's as the crow flies?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
It's actually, if you look at the distance on that site plan, the distance takes that line right through the Sprouts building itself.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Tom? All right, we'll go please.
I just had instructions on how to use your computer. For your record, my name is Stephen Earl. My address is 3101 North Central Avenue in Phoenix. I am here tonight in behalf of Longbow. The owner of Longbow is here tonight, Bob McNichols, also Kitchell Development, who is building Longbow Marketplace, which is the retail portion, phase 1. We appreciate staff recommendation for support on these 2 freeway landmark signs, and we agree with the stipulations. Since I know this is a matter of importance to the city, we thought we would show a few slides to orient everyone. I hope this works. By pushing the up or down, it's the down arrow, not the up arrow. This first slide shows the a comprehensive sign plan that was approved for Longbow in 2005. Longbow itself as a development master plan was approved in 2002, but a few years later they brought forward their comprehensive sign plan, and the red dots along the freeway are the locations of the if I can use this mouse, the red dots here at the corners were shown as the locations for their freeway monument signs. And the yellow is where we're moving them into in order to be farther away from the residential homes to meet the requirement for height versus distance. But we just thought it was important that even as long as more than 10 years ago, there was always a thought that this center, when it was constructed, would eventually need freeway monument landmark signs, but they were clear in that comprehensive sign plan that it would have to go through this process. This is phase 1. It came before you a year ago as a site plan. It's now under active construction. We're hoping to deliver the Sprouts building in about November of this year for them to occupy and then train their folks. And you can see that off to the west of phase 1, we're starting to look at conceptual planning for phases 2 and 3. There is active negotiations with potential tenants, from theaters to fitness to clothing and restaurants. But one question that's always asked, both by Sprouts and every other tenant interest, is, will there be freeway monument signs to identify our business? And that seems to be a very active condition of everyone who is willing to go here. So it took 10 years to get through all the recessionary years, and finally we're coming forward with what we consider to be a terrific phase 1 and hope to go to future phases. But because we're on that freeway, it's pretty important for every tenant to ask us about that. We thought it was important to show you, when we show you the sign itself, to look at the architecture of Sprouts, because that is the architecture of phase 1. You can see that there are bronze elements in this, in that building design. There are also metal elements in the building design, which we felt was important to bring into the sign itself. These are materials and colors. So when you see the sign, I think you'll recognize these materials and colors because we took them from that. This is actually Longbow Golf Course. And you can see that over there, there's a sign with Longbow. It's a clear center ID sign, and it's out of rust. So again, that rust color was important to the overall planning for Longbow. This is the Sprouts building about a month ago, so it's actively being pursued, and then this is the sign itself. This is a sign version that we took to the design review board. We're showing a rust-colored element that is a significant focal point. The black at the top that says Longbow is consistent with the signage for Longbow elsewhere in the center. It is supposed to be at the top. In fact, the guidelines say it must be at the top, and it must be the biggest portion of the sign. The reason I have that black and white drawing there is because that just happens to be the conceptual version of the sign back in 2005. So we were also trying to be somewhat consistent with that initial design back then. Someone at the Design Review Board, in fact, asked us about the metal element and thought it looked more like a pole. So we are trying to expand it more so it doesn't look like a pole. Our object here is to show sky through the sign because we felt it was better looking than to have it be kind of monolithic. But we are working on the base and the skin for the rust color. This is a photograph taken as you're kind of seeing the Wrecker Road exit. I included this for a couple of reasons, and I actually have a video to show this more importantly. Not only to show that the landscaping is starting to mature, and the more it matures, the more it will block anything that's adjacent to it. But also you can see the building itself off in the distance. And as you approach it, the building kind of goes below grade because the freeway, as you can see here, is about 13 to 14 feet below grade, and then ADOT put a berm above that. So the actual visual difference between the freeway and the center is about 35 to 37 feet. That's important for visibility purposes and getting people being able to get off the freeway, both east and west. Now I'm showing eastbound, but there's also a westbound component here. And there is a sign or a bridge, freeway overpass at Wrecker, which tends to block all view behind it to the south of it when you're coming westbound. Another thing that I thought was important in this photograph, and I'll show it more in the video, is there's a lot of beautiful mountains in this area, especially to the north, the Red Mountains, and off to the east in the McDowells. But because the freeway actually curves, it begins its curve right before Wrecker Road, and as it curves to the southeast, all view shed of those mountains turns off and is now to the north. That's important because we're not putting the sign in the middle of a view shed of the mountains. Now, is that where I needed to, Gary? Yeah, the video. This is a mock-up of where the sign would be, and now, so you'd see the first and the second sign. The bottom photograph is where as you're approaching the Wrecker Road exit, you have the two signs. But if we can. Next one. Yeah. Okay, this is the video taken actually by Mr. King, and I want to apologize for the dirty nature of his windshield. It hasn't appeared yet, but it will. As you're coming, this is eastbound on the freeway. You're now going to pass under the Wrecker just before you get to the Wrecker, so this is the Higly exit. So you can see the mountains are off to the west side of this, or the left side of this photograph. You can see now you see the windshield. But here's the landscaping on the other side. But as the road, it's bending now, and so all view of mountains is modified. Now we're coming up on the Wrecker Road exit where the signs will actually, the first sign will actually be. You can see the height of that berm. And then you can see the dotted line indicating people should get over if they want to exit the freeway here. You can start to see in the distance the Sprouts building. So it's not a significant building in the overall view. Now you're going under, and you can see that the view of the Sprouts building completely disappears as you go underneath the freeway. And that freeway overpass is also blocking view the other direction. So stop that and we'll go to the next one. This is the simulation that we took of the 60-foot sign.
It's slow.
And yeah, it's unfortunately slow, but you can see the signs coming up. They're off to the side here. That's the first sign before you reach the opportunity to exit at the Wrecker Road exit. Here's the opportunity to exit. So that sign kind of is before you have to make that decision. The other sign, you start to see it as you come up on the exit. It's pretty tiny at this point, but it does grow as you reach the Wrecker Road area. landscaping from the freeway is, and you can see why we tried it at 40, and then we went to 50, and then we went to 60, tried 70, but felt that 60 was the right amount of signage. So coming the other direction, it was even worse. The sign was not visible unless it had about 60 feet of height. So again, we appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you. We believe that this Longbow Marketplace, anchored by Sprouts as its first major tenant, will bring other tenants. It was kind of like who's going first. We worked on this center for over a year, and it wasn't until Sprouts made the decision to land here with their new prototype store, larger than they've ever built before in Arizona. Now, just in comparison, it's only about 30,000 square feet, and a Fry's is like 90. So even their prototype is not what you would call a massive store. But as soon as they decided to land and committed, now interest from others came. But again, the question always came back, will we be able to be visible with a depressed freeway? And so we think the sign is attractive. We'll work with the design review board. We think the locations are correct. As Tom indicated, we believe we've complied with every one of the guidelines, with the exception of the one where we did move the signs a little bit closer together in order to get them farther away. It has been said that our sign location here is taller than 30 feet. And during the site planning process for this project, we did talk to the neighbors in the neighborhood meeting about the buildings being 30 feet. Because there was concern raised that we had a BIZ overlay for the whole project. And that BIZ overlay allowed up to 90 feet in height. And there was a concern that we were kind of bringing the nose of the camel in, and then we were going to go up to 90 feet. And we said, no, this shopping center portion of the project, we can't speak for other portions of the master plan, but the shopping center is a one-story building. Now, if we're fortunate enough to get a theater, that might be high, it may be one level, but it will be higher. But our point was, in this first phase, we have a 30-foot high building with the architectural accoutrements getting to about 36 feet. We really were not intending to say that there won't be a sign on the freeway that won't be higher than that, but we did place the sign very strategically behind the Sprouts store, so that as you drive up, you're not seeing the sign itself at the interchange. You have to go kind of behind the store, which has the effect of at least screening the lower portion of the sign. We think we therefore meet the intent. We're consistent with the original comprehensive sign plan. We think that without freeway signage, unfortunately, it's really hard to make a successful shopping center, and even more importantly, viable over the long term. And we just make the point that we are consistent with the other freeway landmark monument signs that are in existence in the city of Mesa, especially along the Superstition. But kind of to the west of us, we have Riverview that unfortunately has 5 signs that are very large, and we only want the 2. Glad to respond to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Does anybody have any questions?
I have just one. Do you think if you moved that balloon, then visibility would be better? Because like when I see a balloon, I don't see anything else. Like
Yeah, we're going to delete that balloon. That's, unfortunately, our graphic artist stuck that balloon in for context, and I agree with you. The first thing I looked at was the...
You never know when a random balloon is going to be out there.
Right.
Yeah, there won't be any balloon
You need to shoot
flying.
it down because we can't see the sign if we're looking at the balloon.
I'm happy to run it again, though, if you would like to.
Kids would watch it.
Well, I think the sign is compatible with the area and the architecture, just my 2 cents. I think the height seems perfect. I drive down that freeway all the time and pretty fast, as most people do, and I think you really need to have that height. Like you said, you just drive right by, you won't even know what's there. But did anybody else have any questions before we?
I don't have any questions, just a comment. I think the design, I do like the design. I like how it ties in with Longbow, because I think that's beneficial to show something is happening out there. This is, I think the question I asked earlier was, other than Riverview, this is the first freeway signs that we have on the 202 as it stretches through Mesa. The one question I did, and I don't know whether it be for you, Mr. Earl, or for staff, but that is the pole, I guess, design review had some issues with how thin that pole was.
Yeah.
Have you thought about anything to modify that, or just have you guys had discussions?
We have. We actually thought about expanding it. Since it's a pole, it's a particular size, so you have to change the size and make it simply a bigger
Right.
pole. So one thing we thought of doing is going from the 18 inches it currently is to 24 inches, which creates a more substantial nature to it. We still like having the open air. We think that's a valuable thing so that people are looking at it and it's not just a long monolithic group of tenant signs. It's possible to clad, add even more cladding around that. Of course, that increases maintenance cost, and then that could be painted. So that's another possibility, to make the pole even bigger than 24 inches.
I don't have any issue with the way it is now, but I know that was some of the comments, and they wanted us to be aware of it, but thank you.
Yeah, I think I'd go the opposite. I'd go as small as possible, because you don't even see it it's behind the stuff. It's just gonna look like that rest of it's just kind of floating there. It's just kind of disappear.
Well, we're not design review, but I don't disagree with that. I think it's fine. But either way, good luck with that
Thank you.
part.
We do have a couple of people here who'd like to speak about this case. So the first person here, is it Kevin Watts, is opposed to this item? If you could just give us your name and address for the record, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, this is Kevin Watts, W-A-T-T-S, and I live across the street at 6040 East Portia Circle, the neighborhood just to the east of Recker Road. Before I start, I would like to say, as neighbors of the Long Boar Golf Course and their community and this project, that as a neighbor of yours, my family, our thoughts and prayers are with you, the tragedy you guys had this week. And so as a neighbor, I just want to offer that before I started. As been brought up by staff, as well as by the applicant, there have been meetings, and neighborhood residents were in attendance, and I was one of those, my wife and I, as well as several others. There is some, I think, disagreement about what the intent was of those conversations and what we were trying to find out, and without getting into lawyerese and people not wanting to get themselves tied into a corner. But our concern was, we live right across the street, right across Recker Road. This is our neighborhood, and we have been there for a long time. This project has been dormant for quite a while, and things have changed. And we were concerned of how tall is it gonna be? Did we probably not say any possible item that could be put onto that piece of property, how tall it would be? We probably didn't do that. But I think that our intent was clear, that we're concerned about the height. As we looked in the video today, I drive this drive every day home from work, and it is a depressed area, freeway option where their site is. I would agree with that. But I do have concerns with, now that the buildings are there, you can see the Sprouts buildings as you approach, as you drive past. I'm also not convinced that I need a sign to tell me where the location is. I cannot tell you the last time I drove down the freeway and said, I'm just gonna drive until I see a sign for Sprouts and pull in. That's not how we do business anymore. People are on their phones, they're going through Google. I watched you on Google today trying to pull up information. That's how people find the location, not the sign. I appreciate the fact that they want this, think that this will make or break their business. I'm not thoroughly convinced. But with that, it also impacts me as a neighbor. I live one street, someone else is gonna talk to you today that lives directly across. And so I get the parameters of the city has set at 600 feet for these landmark signs. 600 feet, now it's 30 feet taller than the tallest building is currently be put on that pad. When I stand on my patio, I see that sign 30 feet. I can already see the top of the Sprouts, and I'm a street back, and I'll now see the sign 30 feet above. I appreciate that you've moved it behind, but you can't move it behind if it's taller. So I get the part that sticks up on the top, and I see it. you guys are in a unique position, I feel, at this point, because of the time lapse in this design process, that you've already commented that this is the first time we've approached this on the 202 this far. And there are other complexes that are one exit down on the same freeway currently that have been there for quite some time and are large stores, Target, Bed Bath & Beyond, Fry's Grocery, Albertsons, and they're all making it. There are no freeway signs there. And I would hazard to guess that when you drive past them, it's less visibility of their store than what's going to be currently being seen as you drive past the Sprouts and approach my neighborhood. If a sign does need to be, I would say maybe one sign would help as far east as it possibly can go, as opposed to encroaching on the neighborhood. You don't have the neighborhood on the south. The other business, a lot of the freeway markers that we have already in Mesa, it was quoted in the design review with Dana Park and some of the others, they're not plopped in the middle of a residential community. They're now a residential neighbor. We are literally a 2-lane with a raised median across the street from them. And who is going to speak to you next is right across from you. So it stands out. So I kind of feel perhaps I'm pushing a snowball up a hill, but as I do feel that when you look at the stipulations, they've worked with the design committee. I appreciate that. The city says these are the roads, but as a resident, it affects where I live. It makes now my community that look like a residential, even prior to Longbow, before this new project started, all of their signage is very understated and fits into the landscape and is very, very understated. There's no giant sign that says Longbow Golf Course, yet, interestingly enough, people have found the golf course for several years. So as a neighbor, if you have to have one, I really would rather not, but I understand. But move it further, have one far east as you possibly could go, so it's more of the less impact on the residents that are already in place. We want to be good neighbors. I feel that they want to be good neighbors as well. I'm not buying off on that we need 30 feet above this building that I can already see from the freeway to tell them where the store is. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. All right, the next card we have is for Randy Rostrom.
Randy Rostron, 3140 North Olympic. Kind of get a reference to where I'm at in relation to the project. A couple slides back, that's my backyard looking across the development at Sprouts a couple months ago. That's basically my view from my backyard. So with the sign in mind and where Sprouts is on that, just kind of a little bit of history, going through this back in October, 3 separate meetings, discussed about the tall structure, 36 feet. It was asked many times in both meetings, was confirmed that the Sprouts would be the tallest building. I understand in this first development, who's to say what the next development is and as it moves further west, but this first development, it was going to be 36 feet. Come to find out at the neighborhood meeting, it's 60 feet. Asked many questions as to where along the freeway is that? Is that directly behind Sprouts? Is it further to the west or east? I didn't have any of those dimensions. None of us did at the meeting. We heard about it a little bit at the design review board last week. It's still at 60 feet. And where's that 60 feet at? Is that just behind curb on the exit? Is that the top of that berm? Where that berm sits currently about 15 to 20 feet above where the finished floor is of Sprouts. So in other words, we're talking 90 plus feet in the air on top of that berm. I don't know where it situates at in regards to the exit. Very important to me because I'm already concerned about 60 feet, but where does 60 feet start at? Nowhere has it indicated anywhere on any paperwork that we as the neighbors have seen of that. The other issue is its location. Gary indicated at the neighborhood meeting that it's to the northwest of Sprouts. Don't know where exactly, but yeah, further behind Sprouts, further to the west, all good. The the other comment I made at the design review, and I understand the design review wasn't the comments I had didn't necessarily pertain, so they informed me to more or less bring them all up here. So that's why I'm kind of hitting my list here. So I apologize if I pause here a minute as I'm going through this. As the previous neighbor indicated, why two and why not just one? And the fact that the second sign, which I assume would be to the west, what's going to be on it? What's the future development? It's just a vacant sign sitting there. Who knows for how long? Is that another 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? If you have to have a second sign, if it's approved to go with two signs, please don't build that sign now, because it gives the impression of a vacant, unsuccessful development. Build the sign when you build the development. You got this first development going in, is as important for this first sign, go for it. I just hope that you just approve one sign for the whole 50-acre development. Talked about locations, distance from Wrecker Road. I understand where they come at, and I understand roughly where that's going to be at. But again, just talking about distance for a minute, top of berm, bottom of berm, that berm is about 20 to 25 feet from the actual freeway itself. And in relation to sprouts from finished floor, it's probably somewhere around 15 feet above that finished floor. So it's going to stick up. And another thing, as you come off the exit off of that, you have the large berm, and then behind that you have the ditch or channel that's there, and then you have the development. So it was really hard for me to understand where that sign was going to sit at in that distance from back curb of exit to the actual sprouts or the roundabout on sprouts. Another thing that came up at the meeting on last week was Mesa Riverview, and one of the board members making a comment that wish we'd have made taller signs. I understand we built too many there, but wish they'd have been taller. It's hard to see. Well, it's apples and oranges with this, because Mesa Riverview sits in a hole. Sprouts in this development sits on top. So if you're now putting a 60-foot sign, which is similar from what I understand from the meeting last week of what does that Mesa Riverview, yeah, Mesa Riverview, you see the top half or third. Well, you're going to see the base of these signs plus the berm. Yeah, I mean, this thing, you're literally, when you're driving by, you're actually going to look in your windshield and you're going to look up to see the sign as you come around that curb underneath the overpass at Higly. Couple other things related to signage. Learned at the meeting, the neighborhood meeting, that the signs along Wrecker are in development. Didn't go through this. I was indicated last October that all signage out on the road would go through a design review or development or hearings or discussions like this. I was informed last week or 2 weeks ago when that meeting was at the neighborhood meeting that they're already under development and they're going to be installed soon. I'm not even sure where they're at, other than when I look out that same look or view from my backyard, I've got one to the left and one to the right because I'm directly behind the entrance and exit off of River out of this development. That's my backyard right there. And those two monument signs are right there. I don't know what the height of them are. I don't know where the location from back of sidewalk is, as well as I do know they're illuminated. There's going to be potentially five illuminated signs on the building facing Wrecker that's currently under construction, about ready to wrap up. The future building to the north of that drive is going to have a sign facing Wrecker. So you got all these signs going here, and now we're going to have another sign on the 202 that I'm also going to see from my backyard, all illuminated. So I guess I would ask the city or the board to take a look or consider council to look at approving one sign, take the design reviews recommendations, which I actually agreed with some things in regards to the pole and the material, make it conducive to what the site is, put some added effort into those. But in all, I thought the sign looked great. I just move that sign down further away from Record and verify the location of where this is going. Because that will, I think, play a part in your decision as well, because I haven't heard where that's at yet.
Thank you, Mr. Austin.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and invite Mr. Anderson back up to, maybe you could clarify with us the elevation.
Mr. Anderson, but
Earl, I'm sorry.
that's not a problem. I frequently get wrong names. Let me first respond to what was, I think, a significant concern that Randy just expressed, and that is the location of this sign. The suggestion that it might be on top of the ADOT berm, which would put it 12 to 15 feet above 60 feet. And so I want to make it clear to him, on the record, to all of you, staff knows this, the location of this sign is in the rear side of the parking lot. So it's behind Sprouts, but it's still on the Sprouts level ground. There's a cul-de-sac that comes, maybe I can go back to that. The sign that's being proposed, if I can get the cursor up there, is right there. It's right at the edge of that cul-de-sac on that asphalt. So it's the same height as the rest of the center. It's not being placed on the berm out here that would put it way above grade. And in terms of the visibility of the base of the sign, because that berm does exist, it's going to cover up virtually any viewability of the base of this sign, because the Sprouts building is close enough that you won't see it from that direction, and you're not going to see it from the freeway direction either. In terms of 1 versus 2, one of the things that we worked with staff when we did the on-site review was both viewability of signage going eastbound on the freeway as well as coming westbound. And the Wrecker interchange itself creates a significant visual impediment. So if I'm coming westbound and I'm trying to get off at the Wrecker Road exit, if we have this sign any shorter or any farther away than where it's located, you won't be able to see the sign, even the top where it says Longbow, to know enough to get off at that Wrecker Road exit. As you go underneath that interchange, you'll be able to see the sign, but then you're now a interchange too late. So the freeway landmark monument guidelines were intended to look at both directions, and that's why we spent some time with staff going at 30 feet, 40 feet, 60 feet, and 70 feet, and landed that 60 was the correct. In terms of 1 versus 2, again, the guidelines allow a site that's of this size, and actually Longbow master plan is 313 acres, and so the commercial is 50 plus, but given the fact that we've got 2,600 linear feet, if we move that one sign any farther, it would not have any visual ability for westbound traffic at all. And there will, in a center of this size, be sufficient need for both signs to identify tenants. I guess there's a concern raised by Kevin that we just don't need this. And he referred to the Target Center that you could go around the freeway to Power. And the only reason that I know of why that center does not have a freeway landmark sign is it's not at the freeway. If you see where it's located, it's down on Power Road, so it wouldn't qualify for a sign. But when you go around the 202 over to Gilbert Road, where Target has another center in the Crossroads Center, it definitely has several freeway monument signs, not in Mesa, of course, but in Gilbert. But it demonstrates that when there's an ability to have a freeway sign, every single major tenant says that if we don't have that, we can't locate here. Now, we can debate whether or not they're unnecessarily worried about identifiability, but candidly, they want people to be reminded, we're here, don't forget us. Next time you need that thing, remember that Sprouts is at this location, or Bed Bath & Beyond is at this location, or the Harkins Theater is here. So they just like the fact that their customers are reminded, and that's why we have these freeway monument signs. think those were all of the issues that were raised as to the freeway landmark monument signs. I was hesitant to get into ground signs. I can if you'd like me to, but since I can just say that the ground signs are consistent with the comprehensive sign plan that was approved back in 2005. So we sat down with staff and made some minor modifications. And this freeway landmark monument sign will be consistent with those. So we're all using the same materials. Those are just a whole lot shorter. But the reason they didn't come before you is because they were consistent with the approved plan from 2005.
What about the gentleman's concern with construction, the timing of construction of the second sign? Would that be built once those future phases are built, or is the idea it would be built at the same time as the first one?
You know, candidly, there's a real cost savings with building both of them at once, and we are working with a whole lot of tenants as we go forward. So saying to tenants that are ready to, come forward if they have freeway monument signage and say, well, we have to go back through the whole system to get that one. So we can't tell you that that one will be there, but we think it will be there. It's a whole lot different saying it's there, and all we have to do is put your name on it. So we're ready to get you under construction. That's the reason we'd like to put them both up now. And they would both have the landmark, a longbow at the top, so they would clearly be identified as longbow.
Is it also set up that they'd be the same generally for the tenants? I mean, it would have sprouts on both for west and eastbound, or?
No, not necessarily. We're trying to, with a center 50 acres in size, there's going to be a whole lot of
Numerous.
tenants. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Does anybody have any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Does anyone have any questions for staff?
I have a question for staff. Is there just because I don't know, is there a different standard? Like the Target is farther from the freeway. Is there like if you are this close to the freeway, you get a freeway sign. If you are not right on it, you don't? Is there some sort of like distance from the freeway?
You're required to have freeway frontage.
You have to be
That's
right on it
that's
in
the
order
straightforward
to get
answer,
freeway
yeah.
sign. Okay.
Oh, and one thing with that interchange, it's on McKellips, there's a canal that goes right along there. So there's a lot of property that you can't, if you go around there, there's a whole lot of ADOT land for sale canal, it's a mess. So you wouldn't get anything there. But the one at McDowell, there's a big complex there, but it's high up, and you can actually see down into, you can see pretty far from the freeway down into that commercial complex. You can almost read directly on the fronts of them across Power Road what's all in there. So everything there is very visible, even though it's not on the freeway. But I drive past this every day, and I use Record Road often to, go pick up my kids at their school and things like that. I think it definitely needs the signage. Record Road is not known for being a major thoroughfare in that area. And it doesn't cross a lot of places. But the only reason I always know is because it's got a really good gas station there, cheap gas. But I think it'll be really helpful to have the signage there. Obviously, as I mentioned, for the east and west traffic, that's helpful. It's still going to be really difficult going west to see it, but at least if you can at least see the longbow. When I was looking at the different scenarios of the heights, I definitely did not like this. The 70 feet was way too much. I was kind of leaning towards between the 50 and the 60 as well. I think the 60 will definitely help, especially on the far east side. The way it is, I like the design on it. They're going to be, I'm assuming, something similar to like a backlit. It's going to be very nice style. They're not going to have flashy LEDs or anything like that. I think it's going to be helpful and let people know, because unless when you're traveling, once you get past Riverview on the freeway, this is in my opinion, you kind of just go, and it's either people trying to get to the 60 on the other side, to Apache Junction area, and you just go through there, and you don't really envision that there's any kind of commercial in that area along the freeway at all. And the only way you notice that is if you actually get off or you live in that area. And I think this will be really helpful for people to recognize that there is retail opportunities here for you to go to, get off, check this out. There's retail, there's restaurants, which are highly needed in the area. A lot of those things that people in this area are now going towards Mesa, Tempe, Gilbert, you know, all that stuff. So I think this will be a really good asset to the area. I think the signage helps it immensely, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops. I'm not worried about the second sign being developed at the same time. I think it's a marketing campaign to get new tenants in there, for people to see it and recognize it. You drive by it once and you're like, what was that? I missed it. So I think it's better to have them both built at the same time, have them up, that helps everybody fill the spots and just build it out.
Any other comments?
I do have one question on the tenant areas above, below the Sprout sign. Are those illuminated as well? Will they be when tenants?
Board Member Duff, the letters are illuminated, but not the background.
Right. So it'd be in the same
Push-through letters.
style as the Sprouts?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And my opinion on this is I would support both of these freeway monument signs. I would support the construction of both at the same time. Just because for marketing purposes and for ease, I mean, it's going to save you a lot, I think, to do them at the same time. But I feel like Mr. McNichol's always done a great job at Longbow, and I think this site has been a long time coming. 10 years in the making, maybe 15 years in the making, right, the development of the site. So I applaud you for sticking with it. I know sometimes it's been piecemeal a little bit at a time, but I think now you're kind of on a roll, and I look forward to seeing that. But I think if both signs are done at the same time using the high-quality materials, the same design, I think that'll really add a cohesiveness to the entire site. I'm supportive of it overall.
Segueing into a motion?
I am segueing into a motion. How'd you know that?
I just feel it.
I would move that we approve case Z17-33, the 56 through 5900 blocks of East Longbow Parkway. Approval with conditions.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second that motion.
Okay, all in favor, please vote. Okay. Unanimously approval. Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Wesley, do we have any other business to talk about today?
No, I believe that's it. For the citizens who are here about this, would note that this will go on to council with the Design Review Board recommendation also for their consideration. And so August 28th is when we would anticipate that being on the council agenda.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, if there's no other business, oh, yes.
Do I need to make a motion?
Yes, please, would you like to?
Can I make a motion that we adjourn?
Do you have a second?
I don't know, I'm thinking maybe, yeah, I second.
All right, all in favor, vote please. Oops. Do we have an aye without?
Aye.
I can't see on the tally here, but I think we've got ayes all across the board, yes. Okay, thank you. All right. Go pick up your kids. I was